Welcome, ladies, to the third day of this Disciple-Woman Bible study. Today we're going to be going over the topic of stress. So stress is a physical, mental, and emotional strain or tension. And when we think about stress, I want to ask you, what are some feelings you're experiencing? I know sometimes you say, well, we're feeling stressed. But stress is actually a mixture of feeling, a combination of feelings. When we're experiencing a stressful situation, we can also experience anxiety, fear, worry, sadness, irritability, frustration, and that's what contributes to feeling stressed, is when you're starting to feel a combination of different emotions. Now, granted, because we're living in these crazy times, it is normal to feel stressed. If you're feeling stressed right now because of what everything is going on, that's completely normal. And I believe that we're all stressed at some point. There are many things that cause stress in our lives. And that could be certain situations, a certain person, or even just one of the areas of life, such as finances, your health, your relationships, your work, parenting. I think we all experience stress in one of each of these areas at some point. Now, in the worksheet, you're going to be going over symptoms of stress and how you deal with it and how it manifests in your life. Everyone is different and everyone experiences stress differently, and we respond to stress differently. So when you're doing the worksheet, take some time to really think, okay, how do I respond in stressful situations? What do I tend to do, and is it healthy? What are some things that I have to change about how I respond to stress? So I want to talk a little bit about the brain and how stress really affects our brain. When we experience threatening situations, a part of our brain called the amygdala is responsible for our flight or fight response. It actually springs us into survival mode. The stress in that threatening situation actually triggers our amygdala to act. Our amygdala is also a big part of our emotional responses and is in charge of how we process emotions. And if we're in stressful situations, then our body is constantly feeling like we're in a threatening situation. And that chronic stress can also lead to struggles in memory, and also it can start to rewire your brain and alter the brain structure. Chronic stress can also lead to a lot of health issues, mental issues, and emotional issues. It's very important to keep an eye on our stress and to find ways how to cope with it, but also explore and think about what is it that's causing the stress and how can we mitigate those problems. In the Bible, there are several stories that characters were experiencing stressful situations. And in your devotional, I wrote down a story about Esther. Esther was in a very stressful situation. Her life and her family and all the Jews' lives were at risk of death because of Haman and his evil plot against them. So she knew she had to act and go unsummoned to the king, which was illegal. She knew she was risked at death for even going up and approaching the king without being summoned. So when Mordecai gave her the news that her life and all the Jews' lives were at risk, she sprang into action, and in that verse following hearing the news, she said, I'm going to call a fast. We're going to fast for 3 days. And I'm going to go up to the king, and if I perish, I perish. Now that is a stressful situation to be in. You know, when someone tells you that your life and your family's life is at risk, I sometimes think, what would I have done in that situation? But I love this story because it gives us a perfect example of how our response should be when we're in stressful situations. Esther turned to the Lord first. She called for a fast. She called for prayer. And she ultimately relied on God to save them. And she depended on him. Now, when you encounter stressful situations, do you turn to the Lord first? I know sometimes, we try to take control of our lives and our situations. And sometimes we try to exhaust every resource. And then we turn to the Lord saying, I couldn't do it, so can you help me out? And that's something that I want to challenge you. Do you go to the Lord first when you encounter stressful situations? Or do you like to take control first? It's important to go to the Lord first in our stressful situations because he's the one that can ultimately comfort us. And also he can guide us and give us wisdom on how to handle these problems. Or just like the image that I posted that is part of the giveaway, it said, God sometimes calms the storm but sometimes he lets the storm rage and calms his child. And I think that's a perfect quote, and I loved when I read it because it's so true. God doesn't promise that we're never going to experience problems, but he promises that he will be there for us. And so even if our storm rages on, we can count on him that he can calm us until the storm is over. Something that I also wanted to mention is that I know that we experience stress sometimes on a day-to-day basis. But one thing that I wanted to talk about is we can also experience spiritual stress. And that's something that isn't really talked about a lot. We encounter something, we encounter a situation where we need the Lord, and then that spiritual stress kicks in, or that guilt, because we feel like, why should I go to the Lord if I haven't been obedient? Does God still love me? Did I lose my salvation? I feel like these are all indicators of spiritual stress. We feel like because we're not right with the Lord, then we start to feel like I'm not okay, or maybe I'm not his child anymore. But I just wanted to assure you in this. We are human. God knows our character. God knows our flaws. God knows our human nature. God doesn't tell you, don't talk to me, don't come to me because you haven't been obeying what I've been asking you to do. He welcomes you with open arms every time. He loves you and he wants to comfort you and he wants to be there for you. So I encourage you, if you're feeling that spiritual stress or feeling like you're not right with the Lord, I just pray that you may feel that comfort now. I pray that the Holy Spirit may just overwhelm you with that peace right now. You just even taking the time to watch this video, to work on yourself, he's very proud of that. And he's watching you. And he's so glad that you are returning to him. So I just want to encourage you. If you are feeling that spiritual stress or that guilt or wondering that he's not going to want you, I want to assure you that he will never reject you. He has his arms wide open for you, and he is so happy that you are continuing to meet with him and be with him and grow your relationship with him. It is my prayer that if you're experiencing stress right now because of this situation, or maybe other areas of life that's causing you stress, I pray that he gives you wisdom and how to handle those stressors, and I pray that you receive relief and even spiritual relief as well. I will see you tomorrow as we talk about being productive.